Good day, I'm Glenn O'Cray. I'm on the Dearborn Historical Commission, and I would like to welcome you back to the show. This is the first show we will have produced since the COVID virus. Before I forget it, I want to wish my Aunt Helen Bandyke a wonderful 100th birthday. Happy birthday, Aunt Helen. This is a special program today. We've never done this before. Typically we have one person being interviewed, maybe two. Today we're gonna have 6 people. They are people who have made history, are making history, and will make history. They're gonna be talking about 2 wonderful neighborhoods. Without further ado, I'm gonna introduce Maria Fogarazzi to you. She's on the Dearborn Historical Commission, and she's going to tell you about these historic places. Maria, you're on.
I represent a group of neighbors interested in researching the history of our neighborhoods and in providing resources for historic preservation. About 2 years ago, a group of us got together and began discussing the idea of a historic district or an area ever so roughly stretching from Michigan Avenue to Cherry Hill and from Brady over to Hague. This idea wasn't new. 20 years ago, the MARA, Morley Area Residents Association, had instigated, researched, and tried to get a historic district approved. That also prompted the passing of a historic district ordinance on the books of the city of Dearborn. Very sadly, their initiative failed, and since then, we've lost 15 houses in that area. So this time when the initiative was resurrected, some of the neighborhood representatives suggested asking Riverbend to join in, Riverbend being the area across the river. So we have 2 neighborhoods, the old Arsenal grounds of Mara and Riverbend, roughly Long Boulevard, Law, Alexandrine, joining together in this effort. We are essentially a core group of 9 who research, educate, and promote, but we have other supporters as well. And throughout our endeavor, we have received great advice from the Michigan Historic Preservation Network and have been in touch with other cities who already have historic districts, some for some length of time now, Kalamazoo, Ann Arbor, and Northville. So we gave a mayor's presentation. We attended a mayor's meeting in 2019. We gave a presentation which was very well received. And we started down the road thinking about the things that we would need to consider. But at the same time, I have to preface this by saying that we realized that this area, so rich in Dearborn history, and of course anything related to Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company, would be perfect for this kind of a district. We also came to realize that our historic district ordinance need to be updated and brought into line with State Historic Preservation Office guidelines. In other words, the text needed to be amended, so the city's legal department worked with SHPO to bring that up to date. It must be emphasized that this historic district, when passed, will not mandate large swatches of the city into a historic district. What it does is provide the tool for a neighborhood to investigate whether they would be interested in becoming a historic district, and it gives them the guidelines to go forward. And even after the historic district ordinance is passed, the updated one, and all the research and the studies that are required have been done, you cannot establish a historic district without homeowner consent, nor can you do it without the approval of City Council. So continuing down the road, we started to think about the advantages. We took a look at Dearborn's Master City Plan for 2030 and then thought that how it would fit in with their emphasis on historic preservation. We realized that the properties within these districts tend to appreciate in value at a greater rate than non-historic district areas. We thought about the impact on tourism, if you have an aesthetically cohesive and well-informed and promoted historic district, it could well be your community's greatest asset. Of course, we have Henry Ford and Greenfield Village, but our neighborhood would complement that and blend right in. And finally, a historic district is really a testimony. It's bringing history to the past to life. You have preservation of buildings and streets, and at the same time, you have mixing in modernization and innovation, which is allowed within the guidelines and within the parameters. So in essence, they are a living tribute to communities. So once the ordinance has been passed, a committee would be appointed to research all the structures in the area. Ours number well over 300. There are a few commercial properties, three schools, 6 churches, but most of them are residences. And we did exactly that. We did that in the Historical Museum archives. We did it with the help of Ancestry and old newspaper clippings. And we have a fascinating patchwork of early Dearborn. We also have the Mara/Old Arsenal area, which had many buildings with landlords and tenants, as opposed to Riverbend with the single-family homes. So we really have a great patchwork of early Dearborn, all the way from farming up until industry. We are now giving monthly outreach meetings virtually. Our website is www.arsenalriverbend.com. You can follow us on that website, find out about our upcoming meetings and our progress. So we hope that this presentation will make you enthusiastic about supporting us in the passing of the updated Historic District Ordinance and eventually paving the pathway to a historic district. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our first home is going to be presented by Nancy Harmon. Nancy's the president of the Morley Area Residents Association. She's our go-to person. If you need help doing anything, Nancy's the person. Nancy, tell us about this home.
Welcome to the middle of Morley Avenue. This street was named for Frederick Morley, a Detroit newsman, who realized that once the arsenal closed, this would become valuable property. And in fact, in 1875, there was a newspaper article in the Detroit News saying, "Come to Dearborn and buy land." This house behind me was built by David Lapham. The architectural style is a national full gable front and wing with a Second Empire inspired tower. This house was the first one to have an indoor bathroom because it had a cistern on the 3rd floor. And also David Lapham owned the bank down the street where he could watch if there could possibly be robberies. He also owned a general store on Michigan Avenue, and that was the store had the first telephone. After David, the Blacks purchased the property. Mr. Black died shortly afterwards. His wife and 2 daughters lived here. The 2 daughters married 2 men who did not like each other, so they split the house in half. And it was not a very happy house. But by the 30s, a lady named Margaret lived here. She went to high school right here at Dearborn High and said that this was the party central for the high school. Later, it was saved by Ed and Millie Bovich, who lived next door. They actually never walked through it. They purchased it. It had 100 code violations, and the city of Dearborn wanted to tear it down. But they saved it, they renovated it, they rented it until 1990, and Judy Byra purchased it. Judy has great stories that are in one of Glenn O'Crea's other books. She was honored as the Mother of the Year by Good Morning America. I walked by that morning with my dog, and I saw a bed on the front lawn and someone serving breakfast to her, a nationally known chef named Emeril Lagasse. After Judy sold it to Tony and Karen Cipolla, they renovated 5 houses on this street. But this house, Tony said he wanted to preserve as much as possible on the exterior. Inside, currently, it is a 21st century up-to-date house. On the outside, it looks like it's from 1890. Welcome to Morley Avenue.
For those of you who have a bad memory, This is Nancy Harmon. She's here to tell us about 22611 Morley. Nancy, you're on.
Thank you, Glenn. Welcome to the west end of Morley. This house is called the Mary Louise Snow House. It was built by Louis Simpson. He was on the team of architects who made Henry Ford's Fairlane House. This house was built in 1918, about 20 years after Mary Louise's husband died, Herbert Snow. He was a local realtor, and he died of a tragic bicycle accident. Mary lived here with her sister, Amy Johnson, and daughter, Clara Louise Snow. Clara is known best by her activities with the public library. She helped establish the Dearborn Public Library system, and the library at Telegraph in Pennsylvania is named after her. She lived here most of her life, and Orville Hubbard gave her a citizenship award for having the longest continuous residence in the city of Dearborn. This house has, as a style also, a sunrise and a sunset porch so that you can have coffee in the morning and cocktails in the evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to our next presenter, Karen Milligan. Karen used to run the Milligan School of Ballet. So if she starts dancing in the middle of the presentation, you'll know why. Karen, tell us about this house.
Okay. This two-story Tudor was built in 1934 for Matthew Bennett Wallace and his wife Florence Shutley. It's one of 3 homes on Alexandrine designed by noted Dearborn architect Harry Vickery. The outside features the typical Tudor design elements, and the inside features stunning woodwork. But the feature that gets the most attention is the brickwork. Those bricks that stick out are called clinker bricks, and they're actually brick-making accidents. They're factory rejects. Fortunately, Harry Vickery saw their design potential. Ben, as he was called, and Florence were the owners of the M.B. Wallace Lumber Company, which was located on Michigan Avenue, right where Buffalo Wild Wings now stands. Neither was a stranger to local commerce, as both their parents had owned Dearborn businesses at the turn of the century. Ben's father was a coal and lumber merchant who frequently did business with the city, and Florence's family owned a hotel and boarding house on Mason and Michigan. In 1910, one of the boarders was 24-year-old Matt Bennett, who would marry Florence, the innkeeper's daughter, 2 years later. Ben and Florence had 2 daughters, Catherine and Margaret. Unfortunately, Ben died just 7 years after that house was finished, leaving Florence to raise the girls on her own. She did, and she lived in the house until her death in 1965. At that point, Margaret moved back into her childhood home with her husband, James Moon. Jim and Margaret Moon lived in the house until 1999, when they sold their beloved home and ended the 65-year Wallace era.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to test your memory. Do you remember her name? You on the red couch. No, that's not right. This is Karen Milligan. She's going to tell us the story about the home at 22615 Alexandrine. You're on, Karen.
This beautiful 1.5-story craftsman was built by the Ziegler family. It's one of the oldest homes on Alexandrine, and its history is closely intertwined with Henry Ford and Dearborn. To get the story, we have to go back 3 generations to the mid-1800s, when a young Johann Ziegler left Germany for America. He settled in Springwells. He bought a ribbon farm, not a place for growing ribbons, but a long, narrow strip of land, usually leading to a river. His was 41 acres, and it led to the Rouge. Johann's oldest son, William, grew up working the family farm. He eventually inherited it. He continued to live and farm there until 1912 when he sold it to Henry and Clara Ford. Henry would later use it to make Greenfield Village. In fact, the Martha Mary Chapel stands on what was once the Ziegler family farm. In the meantime, William was elected Dearborn's traffic commissioner, highway commissioner, and he bought another farm in the Carlisle and Pelham area. That property eventually became Ziegler Farms subdivision, with Ziegler Street being named after the highway commissioner, William Ziegler. In 1919, just 7 years after William's transaction with the Fords, his oldest son bought lot number 12 at 361 Alexandrine. John was a man of many talents. He was a carpenter, a real estate developer, an auto mechanic, and he owned the Ziegler Concrete Construction Company. It's very likely that he built that house himself. John and Augusta had one child, Clyde. Clyde went to Dearborn High, where he met the very genteel Audrey Champney of 437 River Lane. The two families' lifestyles were very different, but their kids got married in 1935 and lived in the Champney house until 1943. In 1950, John died unexpectedly, but Augusta continued to live in the house until 1962.
This is Ian Tomaszek. Ian is an architect, and if you have any question at all about when your house was built, he's the go-to guy. The city records sometimes are a little faulty. So when you see Ian at McDonald's, buy him a hamburger, and he will tell you the year your home was built. Ian, you're on.
Thank you so much, Glenn, for that wonderful introduction. So again, my name's Ian, and I'm standing in front of the Sarah Reckinger house. This home is really interesting because, architecturally speaking, it has all the features of a classic gable front and wing American farmhouse, which dates it to around the 1870s or 1880s. However, period maps show that there were no homes in the Riverbend neighborhood at the time, at least until 1915. So the question stands, how did it get here? A story passed down from former resident Agnes Reckinger claims that Henry Ford moved this house here as a gift to widow Sarah Reckinger after her husband Nicholas passed away from influenza in 1919. Now, of course, this sounds like a tall tale, but it's actually quite grounded in reality. Henry Ford knew the Reckinger family personally. He had set up a threshing machine on their farm as a young boy, and he later bought the farm itself, which was at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Southfield. He also would stop Nicholas constantly on his ride around Ford Farms because he drove a large steam traction engine, which Henry Ford was known to have taken a liking to. So it's only imaginable that when Ford employee Nicholas passed away, Ford sought any means possible to support Sarah and her family. Henry Ford would send boxes of parts to this house for Sarah to sort so that she can earn an income on her own to support her 5 children. Sarah also took in boarders at this home and used cardboard to divide the rooms to create more spaces. When the current residents first moved into this home, it still had no kitchen or indoor bathroom, which was in the 1960s. A clue to how old this home actually is. And I'm sure that now that it is well cared for by these owners, it will stand for at least another 100 years.
All right, this is a question for those of you who are very sharp. What was the name of the first speaker today? You got it, you got it. Now I want to know how you spell her name. You got it, very good. Here's Maria again. You're on, Maria. Tell us about this house.
Thank you, Glenn. This 1929 brick 2.5-story duplex has parallel gables, the front one being lower than the back one, with a central entrance and a front hip piece. From 1929 until 1932, Stanley Eugene Knaus and his wife Ruth lived on the second floor. Knaus was a World War I Army Air Corps aviation pilot, and then he became an early aviation expert. He went to work for the Stout Metal Airplane Company as a salesman, but when Henry Ford bought the company in 1925, he became the superintendent of Ford's airplane division. He left again after 1 year. This time he rose to the rank of general manager and vice president for Stout Airlines, which flew a fleet of Ford trimotor passenger planes from the Henry Ford Airport in Dearborn. That would be the current site of the Dearborn Proving Grounds. Some of Knaus's firsts for the aviation industry were running the first scheduled airline, commercial airline. He also ran the first company that made all-metal airplanes. His most important contribution was probably publicizing the convenience and the safety of air travel through giving speeches and writing articles. So in essence, he would have laid the foundation for the modern air travel industry. On the first floor was Dr. Wallace Matthews, a physician originally from Canada whose practice was behind the Bryant Branch Library on Mason. The duplex is unusual in this neighborhood of traditional one-family homes. The first and the second floors are identical, and even more interesting than that, in the 1929 city directory, both Stanley Knaus and Dr. Matthews are listed as owners. So in sum, you have a beautiful Tudor, almost 100 years old, with a bit of intrigue.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have Chris Merlo here. I'm going to test you on his name a little later. Chris is a speechwriter. He is a wordsmith. He's really good. So, Chris, tell us about 134 South Military.
Well, here we are on the corner of South Military and Cherry Hill, and you're looking at the house of Thomas and Augusta Preen. The house was built in circa 1920. We kind of think that maybe it was a Sears and Roebuck kit home, but we haven't verified that yet. But what's significant about Thomas and Augusta is that in 1909, the couple sold their farm to Henry Ford. It was amongst the first farms that Henry Ford bought in this area. And what's equally significant is that the Preen farm was just east on Cherry Hill, and it ran from the river, Rouge River, up Dearborn's favorite sledding hill, through Gulf Crest Estates, all the way to the Dearborn Country Club. And what's also significant about that is Thomas's uncle, Christopher Preen, had a farm on the same location as the golf club, and actually where the country club house now stands is where the Christopher Preen farm was. Anyway, so Thomas sold the farm, went to work for Henry Ford at the Ford Farms, and then also worked at clearing the area around the Rouge, what became the Rouge plant, and that's it. That's the story of Thomas Preen.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've met him before. Here's Ian Tomashek, who's going to tell us the story about 331 South Military. Ian, you're on.
Thank you again, Glenn. Right behind me is the home of Samuel Long. And this home was built, took over 3 years to build between 1879 and 1882. And it is overwhelmingly unique in many ways. It is probably the last Italianate farmhouse in Dearborn. Italianate meaning the architectural style defined by the beautiful corbels and arches over the windows. It is built with bricks that were actually handmade in the 1830s in the Titus Dort brickyard. And according to Samuel Long's memories, he would actually cut timber from his farm, which stretched out for acres behind the house, and take them to town to trade them for bricks so that he could build the home. Samuel Long is a pretty significant local figure who served the city of Dearborn in many ways, and for whom Long Elementary School is named. But he was also a personal friend of Henry Ford, and Henry Ford is said to have visited the home, and Samuel actually had a pass that allowed him to travel across Ford-owned farmland wherever he went. In the 1980s, the former owners of this house, the Somervilles, completely restored it to its almost original appearance by removing drop ceilings and carpet-covered and linoleum-covered floors throughout the home to reveal the wide, almost foot-wide pine planks of the flooring that were hand-cut by Samuel himself from the timber that grew on the farm. And aside for being one of the most recognizable homes in Dearborn, I can certainly say that most of us would agree that this is one of the most beautiful as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sharon Morton. Sharon had been with the communications department at General Motors, and she has been a major force in our work in making this a historic community. She has developed a website that there is none in the world that's better than that. We're standing in front of 22335 Long Boulevard, another great house. Sharon, you're on.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Glenn. So this house was built in 1921 for Frank and Elsie McCormick. It's the oldest house on Long Boulevard. Frank McCormick was raised as a neighbor of Henry Ford. He grew up on a farm that was next to Henry Ford's family farm. So like Henry Ford, he was a mechanically minded young man, and when he grew up, he was hired by Mr. Ford to work in advanced mechanics for him. So interesting about this house, the first structure that was built here was actually the garage before the house, which probably reflects Frank's interest in things mechanical. And so the legend has it that Henry Ford used to visit Frank at his home, and they would sneak away to the garage and they would take apart competitor engines. So it was an opportunity for Mr. Ford to do a little research on his competitors, but he didn't want everybody to know his business and what he was looking at. So when Elsie and Frank were married, Elsie was working as a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse in Dearborn. She grew up on a farm just a couple blocks away here across Cherry Hill. Their first house was built at Brady and Garrison Streets, also in the neighborhood, and it was, interestingly, almost identical to this house. So you may wonder, well, why would somebody build the same house in the same neighborhood? Well, Frank and Elsie loved nature. So this house was built on a beautiful lot that overlooks the Rouge River and the wooded area behind the home. And you'll notice the house is pushed far back from the street, unlike the other houses on the street. So it's really so that the family could enjoy the river. Also, the house is turned. So it was designed, the back of the house is actually facing the street, and the front of the house, which would be where the family would gather and spend most of their time, is the area that looks out on the river. So this house celebrates its 100th year birthday this year. So if you stop and think about that for a minute, you know, what in your life has been built and designed 100 years ago and is still working and doing the job? Probably not much, but this house is. So it stood the test of time. It has adapted and been able to meet the needs of modern families. So I think we can all stop and think happy birthday to the house, as well as to thank Frank and Elsie for building this beautiful house in Dearborn.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to test your memory. What salt-like last name does Sharon have? Morton, you're right. Sharon, you're on.
Thank you, Glenn. So this house was built in 1936. It was a wedding gift to Ralph and Emily Cato. So Ralph's father, George Cato, gave the house to his son as a gift. George Cato was a friend and co-worker of Henry Ford. They worked together at the Detroit Edison plant, and George was actually one of the crew of men that worked with Henry Ford in his garage in the backyard of his house in Detroit when he developed the first gasoline-powered vehicle that he ever built, which was the quadricycle. So Henry Ford, as we know, went on to great things in the automotive industry. George Cato stayed with Detroit Edison. He prospered. He was an inventor in his own right. He invented some things, and he was so prosperous that he could afford to give this beautiful house to his son, Ralph, for a wedding present. When you look at the house, it looks surprisingly modern to our eyes for a house that was built in 1936. And that might be because the architect that built the house, Earl W. Pellerin, went on, after he built this house and some other significant houses and churches in the area, he went on to become one of the leaders in the mid-century modern design movement in architecture in the United States. So one of his big projects was he designed the campus and all the buildings for the original campus for Lawrence Technological University in Southfield. And he also was the first dean of architecture at the school. So the Cato House is one of those architectural gems that are hidden throughout Dearborn. It has a link to a very important architect that was significant in his field and his time, as well as an interesting link to history, our shared automotive history.
Ladies and gentlemen, you met this gentleman a little earlier. I'm going to give you a little test. Who remembers his last name? You there on the green couch. No, it's not Chardonnay. It's Merlot. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Merlot is going to tell you about a wonderful book that is in production. Chris, you're on.
Thanks, Glenn. You know, we've just taken you on a quick tour of the Riverbend and Arsenal neighborhoods. You've seen 10 homes out of 340 that a team of 9 historians have researched and been researching for the last 2 years. We began this journey the summer of 2019. And really, the outcome of this research is a forthcoming book called Stories from the Sidewalk. And literally, the title comes from the fact that we feel every house has a story to tell. Every building in these 2 neighborhoods has a story to tell. And literally, we photographed each of these houses and buildings from the sidewalk. And also, we invite people to take the tour, because the book is a pictorial tour of these 2 neighborhoods. And really, the story of Dearborn and Arsenal and Riverbend began with the incorporation of the city of Dearborn in 1929. That's when Fordson and the village of Dearborn merged. And then also with the rise of the automotive industry, and specifically Ford Motor Company, and the fact that Henry and Clara Bryant Ford built their house, Fairlane Estate, over on the Rouge River, just on the other side of these 2 neighborhoods. The presence of the Ford family, as well as Ford Motor Company, literally acted as a magnet that brought family members, the Ford family members and Bryant family members into these neighborhoods. They actually lived here. Also, we have a number of family friends that grew up with Henry Ford in the Scotch settlement, also lived in these neighborhoods. And as well as the fact with the presence of Ford Motor Company, first and second generation, and some very significant executives of Ford Motor Company lived in this neighborhood. Another really interesting outgrowth of all this too is the fact that Henry Ford, when he decided to shift production here to Dearborn as well as live in Dearborn, began to buy up a significant amount of property in this area. As a result, we're at this point have counted over 50 farmers and descendants of early pioneer families that lived in these 2 neighborhoods. So really interesting stuff that we found out along the way. It's been a fabulous 2-year journey, and really we're not done yet. So stand by, the book's coming out. The book has features a picture of every house in the neighborhood, every building in the neighborhood, along with a short summary. And specifically, our main photographer is Alan Balaka. He is a resident in Riverbend, and we're sure that you're going to enjoy the book once it's published.
If you enjoyed the show, please tell all your friends and relatives. If you didn't enjoy it, just keep it to yourself. Thanks for joining us.